For 800 years, it was the one grave no one was allowed to find. Every explorer who got close reported the same strange pattern. Equipment failing, team members falling ill, accidents that defied probability. A few of them died. And then after nearly a millennium of failed searches, a joint international team finally broke the seal on a chamber hidden beneath a stone outcropping in a region no one had thought to look. Reportedly recovered from inside Genghis Khan's tomb, did not match the legends, did not match the theories, and did not match anything scholars were prepared to see. And what they found next is still classified. The man who vanished for 800 years. This was the greatest mystery in archaeology. The tomb of the most powerful conqueror in human history was hidden so completely that generations of explorers, scholars, and treasure hunters searched in vain. The legend said everyone who attended the funeral was killed. Thousands of horses trampled the burial ground until no trace remained. Rivers were redirected, forests were planted, and the earth itself was rearranged to conceal the site forever. Genghis Khan united the Mongol tribes, built the largest contiguous empire the world has ever seen, and then vanished into the earth as if he had never existed. And here is what nobody is telling you. His tomb did not just disappear by accident. It was engineered to disappear. Explorers who searched for it reported strange misfortunes. Equipment failing without explanation. Team members falling ill with diseases that no doctor could diagnose. Accidents at improbable rates. A few dying under circumstances that seemed too convenient to be coincidental. The land itself, many believe, was protecting its secret. Then, after nearly a millennium of failed searching, the impossible happened. A team of international researchers working alongside Mongolian authorities and cultural guardians located the burial chamber.
For us, because above the bedrock, anything that would be there would be man-made. It would be anomalous, like a wall or a tomb chamber.
They opened it, and what they reportedly recovered from inside has left historians quietly terrified. Stay with me, because to understand why this chamber matters, you first have to understand the man who killed thousands of his own people to stay hidden inside it. The boy who learned to hide. The man who would become Genghis Khan was born around 1162 with the name Temujin. His early life was defined by suffering that would have broken most people. His father was poisoned by rival Tatar tribesmen when Temujin was only 9 years old. The family's clan, seeing no benefit in supporting a widow and her children, abandoned them on the harsh Mongolian steppe to die. They survived by hunting small game, fishing in icy streams, and foraging for roots. They lived in constant fear. Temujin's older half-brother, Bektar, bullied the younger children and claimed the best food for himself. And here is the detail most history books skip over. Temujin and his brother, Khasar, killed Bektar with arrows. They were children. They murdered their own brother for a handful of dry fish. That is the kind of person we are talking about. This brutal childhood forged something in him that would eventually reshape the world. He learned that survival required strength, cunning, and the ability to form alliances that transcended tribal loyalties. He learned that mercy was a luxury the weak could not afford. He learned that power, once gained, had to be consolidated ruthlessly or it would slip away. But he learned something else, too. Something that would matter 8 centuries later. Inside a sealed chamber beneath a stone outcropping, he learned how to hide. How to hide on Burkhan Khaldun when enemies pursued him. How to hide his intentions from allies who thought they understood him. How to hide a body so completely that no living person could ever find it. In 1206, a great assembly of Mongol leaders gathered at the source of the Onan River. They proclaimed Temujin as Genghis Khan, the universal ruler, sovereign of all who lived and felt tense. It was a declaration of ambition that would soon prove to be prophecy. And somewhere in that proclamation, in the mind of a man who had been hunted as a child, a plan was already forming. A plan for how he would eventually disappear. A plan he would guard more carefully than any battle order he ever gave. The empire he hid. What followed was a military campaign unprecedented in human history. Within 2 decades, Genghis Khan would conquer more territory than the Roman Empire had accumulated over centuries. His army was unlike anything the world had seen. He organized his forces using a decimal system. 10 soldiers formed an arban. 10 arbans formed a jagan. 10 jagans formed a minghan. 10 minghans formed a tumun of 10,000. Promotion was based on merit, not birth. A common soldier who showed courage could rise to command thousands. A nobleman who failed could find himself in the ranks or dead. The yasa, his legal code, held the empire together. It protected diplomats and merchants. It guaranteed religious freedom. It made killing an ambassador a crime punishable by the destruction of entire nations. The Yam postal relay system allowed messages to cover 200 miles in a single day with stations every 20 to 30 miles. Fresh horses at every stop. The terror was calculated with cold precision. Cities that surrendered were spared. Cities that resisted were erased. Submit or die. The West Western Xia Kingdom fell. The Jin dynasty of northern China was overwhelmed. The Khwarezmian Empire was annihilated so completely that its ruler died a fugitive on an island in the Caspian Sea. By the end, his empire stretched from the Pacific to the Caspian Sea. He controlled a quarter of the world's population. And then in August of 1227, at the height of his power, something happened that the Mongol army spent weeks trying to hide from the world. Something the most feared warlord in history did not want anyone to see. Genghis Khan died. And get this, nobody can agree on how. A death kept secret. It happened during the campaign against the Western Xia. The Tangut rulers had refused to send troops for an earlier Mongol campaign, and Genghis Khan had returned to punish their disloyalty. The campaign was successful. He did not live to see the end of it. The exact circumstances remain unclear even today. And this is where it gets strange. Some accounts say he fell from his horse during a hunt, suffering internal injuries that killed him over several days. Others claim an arrow wound in battle. Others suggest illness, possibly typhus. One legend claims he was struck by lightning, killed by the sky god Tungri, whom he had always claimed as his divine patron. For different deaths for one man. The army did not announce it. They continued the campaign against Western Xia as if nothing had happened. The enemy capital was captured and its population exterminated according to plan. Only after that final victory was the death of the Great Khan announced. And then the real operation began. Because Genghis Khan did not just die, he was hidden. And what the Mongols did to hide his body is where this story turns from history into something closer to a horror film. The Funeral of Blood. The funeral procession that carried Genghis Khan's body back to Mongolia became the stuff of legend. According to persistent accounts, everyone who encountered the procession was killed to prevent word of the route from spreading. Travelers on the road were cut down. Villagers who saw the procession pass were massacred. The path of the funeral train was marked by death from beginning to end. Slaves who dug the grave were killed when the burial was complete. Soldiers who attended the burial were executed by other soldiers who were themselves put to death by yet another group. The chain of murder continued until no living person knew where the body had been placed. The secret died with those who had kept it. No map, no marker, no confession. Just silence stretched across 800 years of empire, invasion, and revolution. A silence that modern science would eventually decide it had the right to break. Thousands of horses were driven across the burial site, their hooves destroying any trace of disturbed earth. Trees were planted over the grave. Rivers, according to some legends, were redirected to flow over the site. Nature itself was enlisted in the cover-up. And here is the part that still unsettles historians. The Mongols did not just hide the grave. They weaponized the landscape around it. They made the ground lie. The burial ground became sacred territory. The area known as the Ikori, the Great Taboo, was declared off-limits to all but a select group of hereditary guardians called the Dark Hat. For generations, these guardians patrolled the sacred mountain of Burkhan Khaldun and its surrounding forests in the Kenai Mountains, preventing any intrusion. They did this for 800 years across empires, revolutions, Soviet occupation, and the modern republic. Generation after generation, they kept the line. Think about that for a moment. What is a family guard without pay, without recognition, without relief for 800 years? You do not build that kind of institution around a grave alone. And here is the question that haunted archaeologists for 8 centuries. Were the Darkhead guarding a grave, or were they guarding something else? Something that Khan took with him that was never supposed to see daylight again. Before we follow the people who spent their lives and fortunes trying to answer that question, hit subscribe if you want to see how this story actually ends. Because what that team reportedly found inside is going to change how you think about what science has the right to uncover. Searches that ended in death. Modern searches for the tomb began in the 20th century and intensified as technology improved. Satellite imagery, magnetometry, ground-penetrating radar. Every tool humanity could invent was turned on those mountains, and the mountains held their silence. The Three Rivers Expedition, a joint Japanese-Mongolian project, surveyed the sacred region around Burkhan Khaldun. They found aristocratic graves from the Mongol period, weapons, jewelry, sacrificed horses, but never the Khan. Maury Kravitz, an American lawyer, spent decades and a personal fortune searching. He organized expeditions, cultivated Mongolian officials, chased leads that others dismissed as fantasy. He died without finding it. Some believed he had come closer than anyone else. Some believed that was exactly why he died. Albert Yumin Lin, working with National Geographic, pioneered non-invasive techniques that respected Mongolian sensitivities. Satellite imagery, remote sensing. His team found promising anomalies. They could not confirm a tomb. And here is what nobody is telling you about those expeditions. Equipment failed. Team members fell ill with diseases that cleared up the moment they left the search area. Accidents happened at rates that defied probability. A helicopter lost power over a ridgeline that showed no radar anomaly and had to emergency land. A surveyor broke his leg stepping onto a patch of ground that should have been solid. A drone operator reported his device turning itself off mid-flight 3 separate times over the same valley. Some Mongolians believed the land itself was pushing them back. Some researchers quietly started to agree. Then came the Mountain X theory. Explorer Explorer Alan Nichols proposed that everyone had been searching in the wrong place. The traditional focus on Burkhan Khaldun and the Kinai Mountains assumed Genghis Khan had been buried near his birthplace. But Nichols argued that the logistics of transporting a body across vast distances while maintaining absolute secrecy pointed toward a different location entirely. He proposed a remote region near the Yellow River in what is now Inner Mongolia. The theory was controversial. The area was politically sensitive, lying within Chinese territory rather than Mongolia proper. Access was restricted. Many scholars dismissed it, but Nichols and a small team ran preliminary surveys. They reportedly detected anomalies underground, structures that appeared artificial, voids that suggested chambers beneath the surface. The findings were kept quiet due to political sensitivity. For years, nothing happened. Funding dried up. Diplomatic channels closed. And then through conversations that have never been fully disclosed, everything changed. Beneath the stone, the excavation team that finally opened the chamber worked under UNESCO observation with representatives from Mongolia, China, and the Darkhead lineage standing watch at every stage. It was the final day of a month-long excavation. A hand rested on the fitted stone that sealed the chamber entrance. The cold bled through the glove. According to sources close to the excavation, the burial chamber was located beneath a stone outcropping that showed no obvious signs of human modification. The entrance had been sealed with fitted stones and covered with earth that had accumulated over centuries. Only the anomalies detected by ground-penetrating radar revealed that anything lay beneath. When the seal is broken, the air that escapes is colder than the air outside. Accounts from the excavation describe it the same way every time. The chamber was breathing out. A thin white vapor curled from the gap in the stone, carrying a smell no one on the team could identify. Not decay, not earth, something older, something dry. They stepped forward. Preliminary findings suggest the chamber itself is approximately 40 feet long, 20 feet wide, and 12 feet high, carved from bedrock and lined with fitted stone slabs. The walls bear inscriptions in the old Mongolian script. The first headlamp finds them, a trembling ring of light moving across carved symbols that have waited 800 years to be read again. Some appear to be prayers. Others seem to record the deeds of the deceased. Others remain untranslated, their meanings still locked inside words scholars have not seen since the 13th century. And then the beam catches gold. According to reports from inside the excavation, it was the moment several team members nearly lost their footing. Not from fear, from something closer to recognition, as if the chamber had been expecting them. What the team reportedly recovered painted a picture of a ruler prepared for eternity with all the resources of a world empire. Ornate weapons, swords, bows, ceremonial maces arranged around a central burial. Craftsmanship that combined Mongol traditions with techniques learned from Chinese, Persian, and Central Asian artisans. Ceremonial armor decorated with gold and precious stones. Wolves, eagles, horses in full gallop. The quality, according to preliminary reports, exceeded anything previously found in Mongol-era excavations. Scrolls and protective containers had survived the centuries remarkably intact. Their contents are still being analyzed, but sources suggest they include religious texts, possibly military records, and what may be personal documents. The possibility that these scrolls contain writings by or about Genghis Khan himself has generated quiet excitement and quiet fear among the scholars allowed to see them. Textiles remain. Gold ornaments depicted horses, eagles, and the symbols of Mongol sovereignty. Food residues indicated meats, grains, and fermented beverages consistent with Mongol dietary practices. And at the center of the chamber, according to the team, lay human remains. The lead archaeologist reportedly does not speak for several minutes. The dark-haired representative behind the team begins to pray, a low chant in a dialect of Mongolian older than the chamber itself. No one moves. The headlamps stay fixed on the central platform. For the first time in 8 centuries, light is falling on the place where the great Khan was laid down. And here is what nobody is telling you about that moment. One of the team members, a junior researcher from a European institution, reportedly turned off her camera. She could not explain the impulse afterward. Something in the chamber, according to accounts that later circulated through the research community, did not want to be photographed. Radiocarbon dating placed the burial in the early 13th century, consistent with Genghis Khan's death in 1227. DNA analysis, after months of work extracting viable genetic material from severely degraded remains, reportedly linked the bones to Central Asian haplogroups common among modern Mongolians. Textile analysis matched early 13th century Mongolian craftsmanship. The weapons showed evidence of use. The armor fit a man of the height and build suggested by the skeletal remains. For the scientific community, the evidence was compelling. And for everyone standing inside that chamber, the question was no longer whether they had found Genghis Khan. The question was what he had taken into the dark with him and why his followers had killed so many people to make sure no one ever saw it. A nation divided. The reaction in Mongolia was immediate and intense, and nothing about it was simple. Pride surged through the nation. For many Mongolians, Genghis Khan is not merely a historical figure. He is a spiritual ancestor, a founding father whose legacy legacy defines their national identity. The discovery was validation, confirmation that the stories passed down through generations were true. But alongside the pride came dread. Traditional beliefs held that disturbing the burial would bring misfortune, not just to those who violated the tomb, to the nation, perhaps to the world. The great Khan had been hidden for a reason. His rest was not meant to be disturbed. Some believed quietly that opening the chamber had broken something that could not be repaired. Political tensions complicated everything. The tomb was located in Inner Mongolia rather than in Mongolia proper. That raised urgent questions of sovereignty. Who controlled the site? Who owned the artifacts? Who had the right to decide what happened next? China and Mongolia have a complicated relationship shaped by history, geography, and the fact that more ethnic Mongolians live within Chinese borders than in Mongolia itself. The discovery of the tomb on Chinese territory was symbolically loaded. It suggested that the founder of the Mongolian nation had been buried on land his descendants no longer controlled. Russia expressed interest too, with scholars arguing that the Mongol legacy belonged to a broader Eurasian civilization. Western academics approached the discovery with excitement tempered by unease. This was not merely an archaeological site. It was a sacred place whose disturbance had implications that went far beyond science. And somewhere in a climate-controlled storage facility, the scrolls sat untranslated. The question was no longer who owned them. The question was what they said and whether the world was ready to know. Here is something most coverage of the discovery has quietly avoided. The translation team reportedly has not been cleared to publish. Months into the work, portions of the inscriptions remain classified under a joint agreement between the excavation partners. Some scholars have seen the fragments. None of them are talking on the record. One early report from a small Mongolian language outlet, later pulled offline, suggested the content was nothing anyone on the team had expected to find in a tomb. That is all the world has been allowed to know. The line science crossed. Here is where the story gets genuinely uncomfortable. Some argued the tomb should be resealed, the artifacts returned, the site left undisturbed. The knowledge gained, they said, was not worth the violation of sacred ground. Science has limits. Those limits should be respected. Others argued the tomb should be preserved as a museum. Genghis Khan's legacy belongs to humanity. The artifacts and remains should be accessible to scholars and the public alike. Still others proposed a middle path. Preserve the tomb in place. Document its contents through non-invasive means. Protect the site as cultural heritage. Allow limited display of selected artifacts while the core of the burial remains undisturbed. Involve the dark hat in ongoing stewardship. But here's the deeper question, the one nobody in the official meetings wants to say out loud. For centuries, Western scholars removed artifacts from non-Western sites with little regard for the wishes of local populations. Mummies were unwrapped for entertainment. Sacred objects were displayed in museums far from their places of origin. The colonial mindset treated other cultures as raw material for Western knowledge. That mindset has been increasingly challenged in recent decades. But challenged is not the same as abandoned. And a sealed chamber protected by 800 years of sacred law is for a certain kind of archaeologist simply the biggest prize left on the table. Genghis Khan's tomb is a test case. What obligations do scientists have to the communities whose heritage they study? Who decides what knowledge is worth pursuing and what boundaries should never be crossed? And when a culture tells you across 8 centuries and through every mechanism it can summon that something should not be open, at what point is opening it anyway no longer science, but something else entirely? Perhaps the future of archaeology lies in knowing without touching, in documenting without disturbing, in satisfying curiosity while respecting what was never meant to be seen. But that future arrived one chamber too late. What he never wanted found 800 years ago. The most powerful man in the world was hidden in the earth by followers who killed to keep his location secret. They believed his rest should never be disturbed. They did everything within their power to ensure that no one would ever find him. Their efforts failed. Technology eventually revealed what secrecy had concealed. The tomb was found. It was opened. The world now knows things about Genghis Khan's burial that no one has known for 8 centuries. Whether this knowledge justifies the disturbance, whether science overstepped the boundaries that culture and tradition established, whether humanity should have left the grave alone. These questions have no easy answers. What is certain is this: Genghis Khan, who conquered more of the world than any other individual in history, has now been conquered himself. His final secret has been revealed. His eternal rest has been interrupted. The mystery that endured for nearly a millennium has been solved. And the discovery shocked the world not only because of what was found, but because of what it forced us to confront about ourselves. Our hunger for knowledge, our willingness to disturb the dead, our inability to leave a mystery alone, even when solving it may cause harm we cannot yet measure. Genghis Khan built an empire that changed the world. His tomb, now opened after 800 years, may change it again. Not through conquest, through the questions it forces us to answer about who we are and what we are willing to do in the pursuit of truth. 8 centuries of sacred protection, thousands of lives spent guarding a single location, a lineage of hereditary guardians who kept their silence across wars, regimes, and revolutions. And in the end, none of it was enough to to keep one chamber closed. The artifacts sit in careful preservation, their fate undecided. The remains await determination of their final disposition. The scrolls are still being translated, some of them behind doors that have not yet been opened to the public. Some of them perhaps never will be. And somewhere perhaps the spirit of the great Khan watches to see what these distant descendants will make of the secrets he tried so hard to keep. The tomb is open. The mystery is solved, but the story is far from over. So, here is the question I want you to sit with tonight. If you had been standing in that chamber with the excavation team, with the dark-hatted guardian praying behind you, and 800 years of sealed air bleeding into the dark, would you have told them to keep digging? Or would you have told them to close the door and walk away? Drop your answer in the comments. Hit the like button if this story disturbed you the way it disturbed the people who opened that chamber. And subscribe to the channel because there are more sealed doors, more forbidden graves, and more mysteries that were never meant to be solved coming soon. You do not want to miss what we open.